Mae Arden could taste grit on her tongue as she rode beside her father's column. The Texas sun hammered down from a white-hot sky, pulling sweat from her skin and carving muddy trails through the dust on her face. At 22, she had spent more years on remote army posts than in drawing rooms, a truth that unsettled her as much as it secretly thrilled her. "We'll reach Fort Davis before sundown, Miss Arden." Jace Haller called, his voice stiff with the formality he always used around Flint Arden's daughter. Mae tipped her wide hat lower against the glare. Her father rode ahead, Flint Arden upright, as if carved from stone, leading 20 mounted soldiers through the throat of Comanche Pass. They were returning from what he claimed was a diplomatic mission, though everyone knew he'd gone to deliver threats to an Apache band refusing reservation life. She hadn't wanted to trail along, but Flint insisted. "A woman's presence shows peaceful intent," he'd said. Mae knew better. He liked parading her as proof of civilization, a symbol to display before people he considered beneath him. "Water, ma'am," Jace offered, extending his canteen. Mae accepted with gratitude. Heat pressed down from the sky and rose off the earth in waves, making the air shimmer like a mirage. As she drank, something flickered in the corner of her eye, a shift of movement along the red stone cliffs. Before she could speak, the world exploded. Shrill war cries tore through the pass as Apache riders swept down from the ridges. Gunshots cracked, horses screamed, and men shouted commands that dissolved into chaos. Mae's mare bolted and reared, nearly pitching her into the rocks. Behind me, Flint bellowed, firing at an oncoming warrior. Mae fought desperately to steady her panicked horse, while soldiers closed around her, forming a ragged shield. But the Apache fighters cut through the defenses like wind, slipping through canyon walls, arrows and bullets, striking with terrifying precision. A warrior on a paint horse burst through the line, charging straight at her. Mae glimpsed bronze skin, fierce dark eyes under a red band, and the hardened face of a man shaped by loss. She reached for the tiny derringer tucked in her saddlebag, but her horse reared violently. She hit the ground hard, the breath slammed from her chest. When she looked up, the warrior towered over her, outlined by the brutal sun. He swung off his horse in one smooth motion, blade in hand. No, Flint's voice rang out. The warrior, tall, broad-shouldered, his gaze cutting straight through her, spoke in accented, yet steady English. "Tell your men to lower their guns, Captain, or she dies." Mae watched her father's face twist with horror and fury. Around them, the battle froze. Apache warriors held the high-ground rifles and bows trained on every soldier below. Rokan Flint spat the name like poison. "Release my daughter." Rokan didn't even look his way. "Your word is dust, Captain. You promised peace. You brought only war." "We offered fair terms," Flint snapped. "You offered chains or death." Rokan answered sharply. He stepped closer. "Now I give you a choice. Withdraw, and the girl lives. She rides with us until you prove your promise." "Savages," Flint growled. "You'd steal a woman to bargain with." A flicker of disgust passed briefly through Rokan's eyes. "As you stole ours at White Rock Creek." Mae's blood chilled. She had heard whispers of that night, women and children butchered, elders gunned down. Flint never spoke of it. "Mae is innocent," Flint said, voice low. "So were our children," Rokan replied. "She will be treated with honor. When your troops leave Apache lands, she returns." Mae finally found her voice. "Father, don't silence." Mae, Flint snapped. "And if I refuse?" he demanded. "Then many die here today," Rokan answered, "including her." For a long, suffocating moment, no one moved. The only sounds were wounded men groaning and horses stamping nervously. Flint finally lowered his pistol. "1 week, Rokan. After that, I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." Rokan gave a single nod, then turned to Mae. In one swift motion, he hauled her upright and lifted her onto his horse. She twisted against his grip, but he held firm. 1 week, he repeated, swinging up behind her. As they rode off, Mae looked back. Flint stood frozen among defeated soldiers, his fury barely contained. Jace Haller had to restrain him from lunging for his fallen weapon. Then the rocks swallowed the scene behind them, leaving only the thunder of hooves, a rising cloud of dust, and the terrifying awareness of the man seated solidly behind her. A man she'd been taught to fear all her life. They climbed hard into the Davis Mountains for hours. Mae's back screamed from holding herself rigid, determined not to lean into Rokan's chest, even as the trail grew steeper. The other warriors, 5 in all, rode in a tight formation around them, their faces carved into unreadable stone. When they finally halted beside a thin stream sliding through a hidden canyon, Mae Arden's legs nearly folded beneath her as Rokan lifted her down. She staggered away from him, forcing herself to stand tall in front of the men who had taken her. "You won't get away with this," she said, though her voice shook despite her effort to sound bold. Rokan swung off his horse and passed the reins to one of the others. Up close, Mae saw he was younger than she had assumed, perhaps around 30, with a harsh scar running from his temple to his jaw on the left side. His long black hair was tied back, sharpening the angles of his face and the cool, flat look in his eyes. "Sit," he said, pointing toward a flat rock near the stream. Mae stayed on her feet, arms folded in stiff refusal. "I'm not some animal you order around." Something like amusement flickered briefly in his eyes. "Then stand until you drop. It makes no difference to me." He turned away and spoke quickly to the others in Apache. Mae watched them work with swift, practiced efficiency, building a small fire hidden between stones so no smoke would betray them. One warrior climbed to a ridge as lookout while another cleaned a wound on his arm. Her throat burned with thirst until pride finally crumbled. She moved carefully toward the stream, kneeling to scoop handfuls of water to her mouth. The cold taste eased the dryness, and she splashed more onto her face, washing away dust and tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. When she lifted her head, Rokan was watching her, unreadable as ever. He stepped forward, offering a strip of dried meat. "Eat," he said. "We have far to travel." Mae stared at the food, then at him. "Why am I here? I want the truth." Rokan studied her for a moment before he spoke. "Your father leads the soldiers who kill our people, drive us from our land, break every promise ever made. And I'm supposed to pay for that," she snapped. "Is this revenge?" "No." His tone cut like flint, sharp and rising with anger. "You live. You will stay alive. You are here so others may live." "My father won't withdraw," Mae said. "He'll come for me." "Yes," Rokan agreed, still holding the meat toward her. "But each day he hunts you is another day my people move unseen. Another day the children and the old reach the mountains." Mae took the food reluctantly. "So you're using me to buy time?" "Yes." No apology. No excuse. Only blunt truth. Night settled over the canyon. Mae curled against a rock, refusing the blanket one of the young warriors tried to hand her. The desert chill dropped fast, cutting through her thin riding dress until she trembled uncontrollably. Rokan approached without a word, draping a blanket over her shoulders, despite her pushing it away. "Your death gains nothing," he said quietly. "Your suffering gains nothing." Mae gripped the blanket, hating how badly she needed its warmth. "Then why take me?" "At all," she demanded. Rokan looked toward the star-filled sky, his profile sharp against the fire glow. "Because your father values you, and men like him only understand when something they value is at risk." He turned to her, his expression softening just a fraction. "Sleep. Tomorrow will be worse." As he walked off, Mae found her gaze following him, the straight line of his shoulders, the steady grace in his steps. Nothing like the drunken, violent stories she'd been raised to believe. Beneath the vast Texas sky, warmed by a fire she didn't want to need, Mae felt the first crack in the certainty she'd always held. She was a captive, frightened, and alone. But something whispered that the greatest danger wasn't the man who had taken her. It was what would happen when her father finally caught up. Dawn came with the piercing cry of a hawk circling high above. Mae opened her eyes to find herself wrapped tightly in the blanket, her body sore from the unforgiving ground. For one dizzy moment, she thought she was waking in her room at Fort Davis, that all this had been some strange dream. Then she saw Rokan across the dying embers, watching her, and the truth hit like a fist. "We leave soon," he said, stepping toward her. He offered a water skin and a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. Water. Food. Mae accepted them silently, too drained to resist. Inside the bundle were more strips of dried meat and something like flatbread. She ate slowly, watching the Apache warriors break down their camp, leaving barely a trace of their presence. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked. Rokan tightened a pack onto his horse before answering. "To a place your father's maps do not show." "How far?" 3 days. Maybe 4. Mae swallowed, imagining the miles ahead, deeper into Apache country, farther from anything familiar. When it came time to mount up again, Rokan approached with a rope in hand. Mae stiffened, backing away. "Don't touch me." "Your hands," he said, his expression flat as stone. "No." Mae lifted her chin with stubborn pride. "I won't be tied up like some wild beast." "You tried to take the knife from my belt while you slept." Rokan replied, his tone flat and steady. Heat flared across Mae's cheeks. She had crept close in the dark, certain he was asleep, certain she might gain some small advantage. Clearly, she'd been wrong. "You would have done the same," she shot back. A flicker of respect, or something close to it, crossed his features. "Yes. But still, your hands." Mae reluctantly held out her wrists, bracing for pain, expecting the rope to bite deep. But Rokan only looped it loosely, just enough to keep her from slipping free, not enough to injure. "This is not to harm you," he said quietly. "Then what?" Mae asked bitterly. "To remind me of what, that you are not free to walk away, that your life now weighs against the lives of my people." His dark eyes locked onto hers. "And that choices have consequences. Yours, your father's, and mine." Before she could answer, he lifted her onto his horse again and climbed up behind her. As sunlight rose behind them, Mae felt the heaviness of his words settle over her shoulders. For the first time, she wondered what roads had pushed Rokan to this point, what choices had brought a man to steal a captain's daughter, just to buy hope for his people. The land grew harsher as they pushed west, following narrow, hidden trails only Rokan and his warriors seemed able to read. They spoke little, stopping only long enough to water the horses and drink from springs known only to Apache scouts. By late afternoon, Mae's body throbbed from the relentless motion. She'd tried endlessly to sit upright, to keep distance between herself and Rokan's chest. But the grueling terrain wore down her resistance. Eventually, exhaustion forced her to lean back, her head dipping forward, as sleep tugged at her. Once she jolted awake to find Rokan's arm bracing her, keeping her from slipping from the saddle. She stiffened instantly, pulling away as far as she could. "Sleep if you must," he murmured near her ear. "I won't let you fall." "Why would you care?" she demanded, bitterness slipping out before she could stop it. Rokan didn't respond for a long moment, so long she assumed he wouldn't answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a gravity she hadn't heard before. "I've seen enough falling." Something in his tone made Mae twist just enough to try to see his face, but the hard line of his jaw revealed nothing. They traveled in silence until the sun burned red against the horizon. Rokan signaled a halt in a narrow hollow sheltered by 2 towering boulders. Mae's legs buckled when she dismounted, numb from the long ride. Rokan caught her arm to steady her before she hit the ground. The touch was brief, but it sent a sharp, unwelcome shiver through her. She jerked away, unsettled by her own reaction. "Your bonds," Rokan said, reaching for her wrists. Mae extended her hands, expecting him to examine the rope. Instead, he unknotted it completely. "Why?" she asked, rubbing wrists that showed no marks. "We're too far from Fort Davis now," he answered. "And you're smart enough to know the desert would kill you long before you found the way back." The blunt truth stole any sharp retort she might have had. Mae scanned the emptiness around them, endless red rock, dry wind, and nothing else. He was right. She wouldn't survive a single day alone. That evening, while the warriors prepared a simple meal, one of them, young, his face softer than the rest, approached with a small bowl of earthy paste. "For hands," he said in broken English, nodding to her blistered palms. Mae hesitated, then accepted. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once and returned to the fire. Mae rubbed the cooling paste across her raw skin, sighing with relief. When she looked up, Rokan was watching, unreadable as ever. Later, when camp fell quiet and only the lookout remained awake, Mae found sleep impossible. She sat wrapped in her blanket, staring at the endless sprawl of stars overhead, brighter than she'd ever seen near the fort. "You should sleep." Rokan's voice floated softly from the dark. He'd been so still she hadn't realized he was awake. "I can't," she admitted. He shifted closer, resting a few feet away. "The stars help when sleep won't come," he said, looking upward. "They don't change even when everything down here shifts like sand." Mae studied his profile, caught off guard by the quiet poetry in his words. "Do your people have stories about them?" she asked before she could stop herself. Rokan paused long enough she thought he would ignore the question. Then he pointed to a bright cluster of stars. "There is the white-painted woman who bore the child of water. He destroyed the monsters that tormented our people." Mae leaned forward slightly. "What monsters?" Rokan's reply was soft but heavy as stone. "Greed. Fear. The hunger for power that eats men from the inside." His gaze drifted from the stars back to her. "Some monsters wear human faces." The space between them seemed to tighten heavy with things neither dared to say aloud. Mae thought of Mae Arden, of the quiet rumors about White Rock Creek, of the flash of pain in Rokan's eyes when he spoke of the children who died there. "Not all white people are monsters," she murmured, feeling an odd need to defend herself, though he'd never accused her directly. No, Rokan agreed, holding her eyes steadily. "And not all Apache are savages." The words lingered between them like a line drawn in sand, daring her to rethink everything she'd been raised to believe. Before she could answer, Rokan stood. "Sleep," he said again, but softer this time. "Tomorrow we cross the hardest country." As he moved away, Mae felt something shift deep inside her, a tiny crack forming in the rock-solid certainty of her world. She lay down, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders, and for the first time since being taken, sleep came without fear. Her dreams were strangely calm. On the third morning, they entered a desolate stretch of land so silent it seemed to swallow sound itself. Heat warped the horizon into wavering illusions that shimmered and vanished like ghosts. El Despoblado, Rokan called it as they rode. The uninhabited. Mae saw why. Nothing lived here. No birds glided overhead, no lizards flickered over rocks. Even the few plants looked half dead, clinging to life by stubborn will alone. "How does anything survive this?" she asked, her voice hoarse despite the water. Rokan made sure she drank. "By knowing its secrets," he said, "by respecting its power." They pressed on, the horses laboring over sand and stone. Mae had long given up trying to sit stiffly apart. The merciless sun drained every ounce of strength she had. She leaned into Rokan, his body the only shade she could rely on, and found herself oddly grateful for it. Even the Apache warriors looked strained by noon. When they finally stopped at a shallow rock basin holding a murky pool, Mae slid off the horse without waiting. Her legs buckled instantly. Rokan was beside her in a heartbeat, one strong arm around her waist. Slowly, he warned, "The heat steals your strength before you feel it go." Mae nodded shakily as he guided her beneath a sliver of shade under an overhanging rock. She sank down, closing her eyes against the dizzy spinning in her head. When she opened them again, Rokan was kneeling in front of her, holding out his water skin. "Drink," he said. "Small sips." Too drained to argue, Mae obeyed. The warm water soothed her throat almost instantly. As she handed the skin back, She noticed a dark stain spreading across his sleeve. "You're bleeding," she said, reaching toward his arm, before she even realized she'd moved. Rokan glanced at the blood, as if seeing it for the first time. "It is nothing. A bullet grazed me during the attack." Mae frowned. "Let me see it." For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he nodded once and pushed up his sleeve, revealing a shallow but inflamed wound across his upper arm. The skin was red and swelling, early signs of infection. "This needs cleaning," Mae said, worry overtaking everything else. She had helped the fort doctor enough times to recognize danger when she saw it. Rokan studied her face, perhaps looking for a trap. Then he nodded again. "There is medicine in my pack." Mae rose unsteadily and retrieved the small leather pouch he indicated. Inside were dried herbs and a small pot of the same salve Naro had given her earlier. She worked methodically, cleaning the wound, applying the salve, binding it with a strip she tore from her own petticoat. Rokan watched her closely, his gaze intense enough to raise heat along her neck. "You've done this before," he said as she tied off the bandage. "The doctor at Fort Davis taught me," Mae answered, suddenly self-conscious. "He said a woman should know how to treat wounds out here." "Your father taught you much about surviving the frontier," Rokan said. "But not everything." Mae looked up, startled by how accurately he'd seen through her. "No," she admitted quietly. "Not everything." A call from one of the warriors snapped the moment apart. Rokan stood and answered in Apache, glancing toward the horizon where dark clouds gathered quickly. "We have to move," he told her, offering his hand to help her rise. "A storm is coming." "Isn't that good?" Mae asked. "Rain means water." Rokan's expression darkened. "Not here. These storms bring flash floods. They sweep away men and horses before you can breathe." They mounted in haste and pushed forward, racing the wall of clouds rolling toward them. Mae felt the shift in the air long before the storm broke, a charged heaviness that raised goose flesh along her arms. Behind them, lightning tore a jagged line across the sky, thunder rolling after it like the growl of some waking beast. Rain began falling in heavy scattered drops as they reached the mouth of a narrow canyon. Rokan urged his horse forward, guiding them into the twisting passage with instinctive confidence. The other warriors stayed close, their faces grim. Within minutes, the drizzle became a pounding sheet of rain. Water streamed down the canyon walls, joining into rushing currents that cut across their path. There, Rokan shouted above the roar, pointing to a dark opening ahead. A shallow cave carved into the rock. They barely made it inside before a crack of thunder shook the ground beneath their feet. The cave stretched back maybe 20 feet, enough room for men and horses to crowd together, shielded from the violent downpour. Mae slid off the horse, her clothes clinging to her skin, soaked through. She shivered uncontrollably as the desert heat vanished in an instant. Rokan vanished into the rear shadows and returned carrying an armful of dry wood. From a shelter used before, he explained, arranging the pieces. The youngest warrior, Naro, struck sparks into a tin of tinder until a flame caught spreading warmth and flickering light through the cave. Mae huddled close to the fire teeth, chattering. Without speaking, Rokan pulled a dry blanket from his pack and draped it over her shoulders. Their eyes met briefly in the fire's glow, and Mae felt a tightness in her chest she didn't understand. "Thank you," she whispered. He dipped his head once, then stepped away to speak with the others. Outside, the storm intensified, water pouring past the cave entrance in a raging torrent, carrying rocks and debris with frightening force. Mae stared at the flood in stunned silence, realizing how close they'd come to being swept away. "We stay here tonight," Rokan said as he returned to sit across the fire from her. "The storm will move on, but the floods make travel deadly until morning." Mae nodded, pulling the blanket tighter. The cave felt strangely intimate now, with the storm sealing them off from the world and the fire casting a small circle of light that seemed to hold only the two of them, despite the other warriors resting nearby. As night deepened, the men gradually settled into sleep, leaving only Rokan and Mae awake by the fire. The storm had eased into a steady rainfall, its rhythm almost soothing. You should sleep, Rokan said quietly. I'm not tired, Mae lied, though exhaustion pulled at every muscle. Something kept her awake, some tension that had grown steadily between them. Rokan studied her for a long moment. You are afraid, he said simply. Wouldn't you be, she countered, taken from everyone you know, surrounded by people who see you as the enemy. Are we enemies? He asked, the firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. The question hung between them, demanding an answer she didn't have. 3 days ago she would have said yes without hesitation. Now, I don't know what we are, she admitted. Rokan nodded slightly, as if that made perfect sense. When I was a boy, he began after a pause, my father took me to meet white traders. They brought gifts, spoke friendly words. Mae felt her stomach tighten. That night, Rokan continued, voice steady, but edged with old pain. They returned with soldiers. Half our camp was killed. Mae's breath caught. I'm sorry. My father died believing the promises of those men, Rokan said. I learned that day that words mean nothing. Only actions show truth. Is that why you took me? Mae asked softly. To show my father the truth of his actions, in part, Rokan admitted. But also to stop more killing. Your father's soldiers were preparing to strike our winter camps. Women, elders, children. They would not have survived. How do you know this? Mae whispered, though deep down she already feared the answer. We have eyes and ears at your fort, Rokan said. We heard the orders 1 week to prepare for a final solution to the Apache problem. Mae closed her eyes, sickened. She had heard Mae Arden speak those exact words during a meeting with his officers 3 days before their departure. She hadn't understood what they meant. Or perhaps she hadn't wanted to. I didn't know, she whispered. No, Rokan said gently. You did not ask. The truth hit her like a blow. How much had she refused to see? How blindly had she accepted her father's explanations? What will happen to your people? Mae asked, meeting his gaze. Some have gone north to join other bands, Rokan said. Some south across the border. Rokan stared into the flames for a long moment before speaking. The rest. We stand until there's nothing left of us. His voice carried no fear, only certainty. And me? Mae asked softly. When the week ends, what becomes of me? Something eased just slightly in Rokan's expression. I gave my word. No harm will come to you, but you don't expect to survive this, do you? Mae pressed a tremor slipping into her voice. She needed the truth more than she needed air. Rokan didn't answer at first. The crackle of burning wood filled the silence. The Apache will survive, he said at last. Whether I live to see it, that doesn't matter. His calm acceptance cracked something deep inside Mae. Her eyes stung, and before she could stop them, tears blurred her vision. She turned her face away, ashamed of how easily she broke. But Rokan moved toward her, lowering himself to one knee. His fingers brushed a tear from her cheek with surprising gentleness. You cry for an enemy, he asked quietly, not mocking, only curious. I cry for a man willing to die so his people might live, Mae whispered. For children who grow up without fathers. For all of us trapped in a war none of us asked for. Rokan's hand lingered against her skin, warm and steady. Mae's heart thrashed in her chest, her pulse loud enough to drown the storm. Mae. He murmured her name, leaving his lips for the first time. The sound sent a shiver through her, stealing her breath. But before either could speak again, a shout cut through the cavern. Naro's voice echoed urgently from the cave entrance. Rokan was on his feet in an instant, striding to the opening with Mae close behind. Through the sheets of rain, faint sparks of firelight flickered along the ridge they had traveled earlier. Torches, Rokan said grimly. Your father's men. They've picked up our trail. In this storm, Mae whispered, stunned. Trackers. Rokan answered, jaw tightening. Likely Apache scouts working for your father. His voice carried a bitter heaviness. He barked orders in Apache, and the warriors sprang into motion, grabbing their gear and tightening their saddles. "We ride now," Rokan told her, handing her the dress she had left near the fire to dry. "They'll assume we stayed for shelter." Mae dressed quickly, fear clawing at her throat. Her father must have ignored Rokan's demand for a week's peace and marched the cavalry after them immediately. Outside, water still rushed across the canyon floor, slick and dangerous. Rokan guided his horse into the flow, lifting Mae onto its back before climbing up behind her. "We follow the runoff," he said. "It'll wash our tracks away." They rode in tense silence. Only the splash of hooves and the low growl of distant thunder filled the night. Mae strained to hear anything behind them, but the water drowned every clue. By dawn, the sky was a pale silver, and Rokan led them out of the canyon into a broad valley scattered with juniper and brush. Hills shimmered in the morning light ahead. There, he said quietly, "Our people." Mae felt a confusing blend of dread relief and an ache she refused to name. Their journey was nearly over, but something in her didn't want their time alone to end. They were halfway to the hills when a sharp bird call whistle cut through the stillness. Rokan halted immediately, turning back. Along the ridge behind them, sunlight flashed off rifle barrels and brass buttons. Cavalry. Mae breathed heart-dropping. Rokan's arm tightened around her waist. "They're moving too fast," he said. "Much too fast." The warriors circled close, speaking rapidly in Apache. Mae saw Naro shake his head in protest. "What's wrong?" she asked. "They'll reach us before we reach the hills," Rokan said. "We have to split up." He issued another command. Most of the men rode off in different directions. Only Naro stayed behind, his young face tight with worry. "Tavo will take you to our camp," Rokan told her, already moving to lift her down. "What?" Mae grabbed his arm, panic rising. "What are you doing?" Rokan held her gaze. In his eyes she saw the truth, resignation, resolve, and something that made her chest ache. "I'll draw them away," he said. "Give you time to reach safety. They'll kill you." Mae cried, voice cracking. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe even tenderness. "You care what happens to me?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Mae said, unwilling to deny it anymore. "Yes, I do." For an instant, Rokan's guarded expression cracked, revealing something raw and unshielded, an emotion Mae couldn't name, one that stole the breath straight from her lungs. Then the moment vanished, and he was lifting her down, transferring her to Tavo's waiting horse. The young warrior reached out for her, but Mae resisted, her hand gripping Rokan's arm. "Come with us," she begged. "There has to be another way." Rokan shook his head slowly. "Your father won't stop until he lays eyes on you. Unless I give him something else to chase. He'll never believe I would separate from you," Mae argued desperately. "No," Rokan said quietly. "But he'll have to follow, just to be certain." Before she could protest again, he leaned down from the saddle and, in a swift and fierce motion that stunned them both, pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, sharp as a spark from flint, yet it shook Mae to her core. "Live Mae Arden," he murmured against her lips. Then he straightened, signaled Tavo with a sharp nod, and spun his horse toward the open desert. The other warriors broke in separate directions, creating a web of confusing tracks. Tavo held Mae firmly as he urged his horse toward the hills. Mae twisted to look back, watching Rokan's figure shrink against the storm-washed plain. Her pulse hammered, her lips still tingling from his touch. When he finally vanished, it felt as if something had been ripped clean out of her chest. The Apache camp was nothing like she had imagined. Hidden in a sheltered valley between two wooded ridges, it was made up of brush shelters and a handful of sturdier stone and timber lodges. Women tended fires in small gardens carved into the slope, while children darted among the trees, their laughter bright against the hush of the valley. As Tavo guided her into the clearing, movement slowed, then stopped entirely. Every face turned unreadable expressions, shifting from curiosity to suspicion, and in some cases pure hostility. An elderly woman approached, her face etched with deep lines, her back straight, her eyes sharp as flint. She spoke to Tavo in Apache, her tone clipped and questioning. Rokan's grandmother Tavo explained in his rough English. She asks why you are here alone. Where is Rokan? Mae opened her mouth to answer, but a cry rose from the far edge of camp. A rider burst through the trees at full speed, shouting in Apache. Instantly the camp transformed, women pulling children close, men grabbing bows and rifles, fires stamped out in an instant. What's happening? Mae gasped, clutching Tavo's arm. Soldiers coming, he said grimly. From the east. They are not following Rokan. They come here. Ice slid into Mae's veins. How did they find this place? Tavo's jaw hardened. Betrayal. Someone told them. Sani Rokan's grandmother strode up to Mae, speaking rapidly, her tone sharp as a blade. Mae couldn't understand the words, but the accusation was clear. The old woman believed she had led the cavalry straight to them. No, Mae said firmly, meeting Sani's fierce gaze. I didn't know where he was taking me. I would never betray Rokan. Tavo translated. Something in Sani's expression loosened. Not trust, not yet, but a sliver of belief. She barked new orders, and the valley erupted into organized urgency as families began packing what little they owned. We must go, Tavo said. Into the higher mountains. But Rokan, Mae cried. He's drawing my father the wrong way. He doesn't know soldiers are coming here. No time, Tavo said, voice cracking under the weight of it. We cannot help him now. Mae looked around at the frightened children, the elders struggling to pack, the women clutching babies, and a decision sparked inside her, bright and hard. I can help, she said, squaring her shoulders. I know how the cavalry works. I know how my father thinks. Tavo hesitated, doubt clear in his eyes. Please, Mae urged. Rokan risked everything for your people. Let me repay even a piece of that. Tavo relayed her words to Sani. The old woman studied Mae with hawk-like scrutiny, then gave a single sharp nod. She says you help, Tavo said. What do you do? How far are the soldiers? Mae asked. 1 hour? Maybe less. They move slow, checking every ravine. Mae pointed to the narrow stream threading through the center of camp. We need to block the main trail into this valley. Make them think the camp fled west instead of north. It will buy more time. For the next half hour, Mae led a small group of warriors in reshaping the approaches to the valley. They cut down trees to block the primary path, swept away signs of the northern escape, and laid false trails toward the west, the direction Rokan had gone. As she worked, Mae gave instructions with confidence she didn't know she possessed. And the warriors, skeptical at first, began following her lead with growing respect as they saw her strategy take shape. When everything was ready, Mae returned to find nearly all of the camp gone, except Sani, a handful of warriors, and Tavo. It's done, Mae said, breathless. But we need to move. Sani spoke again. Tavo translated. She says you ride with her. The warriors stay to be sure soldiers follow the false trail. Mae nodded, then seized Tavo's arm. Tavo, we have to warn Rokan. I go. Tavo said, his voice firm and resolute. Find him. Tell him the soldiers aren't following, Mae said, breathless with urgency. Relief washed through her when Tavo nodded. Thank you. But before they could mount, a rifle cracked in the distance, echoing like a warning across the valley walls. The cavalry was closer than anyone feared. Go now, one of the warriors barked, boosting Mae onto the horse behind Sani. Mae locked eyes with Tavo, desperation rising in her voice. Find him. Please bring him back to us. Tavo dipped his head, once fiercely determined, then swung onto his horse and tore westward, toward the trail Rokan had taken. Mae, Sani, and the remaining families pushed north, disappearing into the thick pines that swallowed the mountainsides. As they climbed higher, Mae found herself praying first to the God she'd grown up with, then to whatever spirits the Apache believed guarded their people. She prayed for Rokan. She prayed for Tavo. She prayed for all of them. Their emergency refuge lay beneath a vast, overhanging cliff, little more than a scattering of natural rock alcoves and hidden storage caches. It had clearly been prepared for a day just like this. As the hours passed, more and more families arrived, breathless, shaken, but alive, filtering in by the dozens, from different directions to erase any clear trail. By nightfall, most of the tribe was gathered again. Missing were the warriors who'd stayed behind, and Rokan and Tavo. Mae helped where she could, handing out water, tending the elderly, comforting frightened children. Her small bits of medical knowledge proved useful, and some of the Apache women began giving her cautious nods of approval as she worked. Sani kept Mae close, speaking in a mix of Apache and broken English. Bit by bit, Mae began catching the meaning behind her gestures and words. Rokan Sani said that evening as the two sat by a sheltered fire, "He good man. Strong leader." She pressed a hand over her heart. "Big hurt here." "Hurt?" Mae asked softly. Sani mimed something breaking in two. "Wife. Child. Soldiers kill." Mae felt all the air leave her chest. Rokan had a family. Sani nodded, eyes shadowed by old grief. 3 summers ago, White Rock Creek. The name hit Mae like a physical blow. The massacre her father had been accused of, women and children, dead by military gunfire. Rokan's wife and child had been among them. "Oh God," Mae whispered, tears blurring her vision. I didn't know." Sani studied her trembling face, then placed a frail hand against Mae's cheek. "Not your doing," she said gently. "But now you see." Mae swallowed hard, unable to speak past the knot rising in her throat. Everything Rokan had done, taking her, bargaining with her father, fighting to shield his people, it all shifted into heartbreaking clarity. Her father had helped create this loss. Unable to bear the weight of it, Mae rose and walked to the cliff's edge. The moonlit valley stretched endlessly before her, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Rokan was either still running or lying lifeless beneath the night sky. "He lives," Sani said behind her. "How can you know?" Mae whispered. Sani touched her chest. "Here. My grandson has strong spirit." Mae wished she could believe that, without doubt. "Will Tavo find him?" "If anyone can," Sani replied, stepping beside her, "he will." Sani's voice softened. "Do you care for Rokan?" Mae didn't try to hide it. "Yes, I know I shouldn't, but I do." Sani let out a soft, almost amused breath. "Heart goes its own way, not where it should, only where it must." They stood together in the hush of night, the scent of pine drifting through the cool air. "What happens after this?" Mae asked. "When it's all over," Sani's lined face tightened. "For Apache, more fighting, more dying, until no one left to bleed." "It doesn't have to be that way." Mae said, an idea sparking in her mind. What if there was another solution? "What if I could help, Sani?" Sani narrowed her eyes. "How my father respects me," Mae said slowly. "He listens to me. If I can speak to him, make him understand what Sani asked, that you're human." Sani's voice carried the weight of generations. "White leaders know this already. They choose not to see." "Then I'll make him see," Mae said, conviction sharpening her words. "I'll make them all see." Before Sani could answer, shouts erupted across the camp. People rushed from shelters, voices rising in confusion, fear, or hope. Mae and Sani pushed through the crowd. There at the center of it all stood Tavo, clothes torn, blood soaking his sleeve, holding up a half-conscious Rokan. "Rokan!" Mae cried, running to him. Rokan lifted his head at the sound of her voice, his dark gaze finding Mae through the fog of pain. A blood-soaked bandage wrapped his thigh, and a deep cut across his brow had left half his face streaked with dried crimson. "Mae," he breathed. voice ragged. "You're safe because of you," Mae said, dropping beside him as Tavo eased him down against a slab of rock. "What happened?" "Ambush," Tavo answered grimly. "Soldiers waiting in a ravine. They knew he would pass that way." "Another betrayal," Rokan muttered, wincing while Mae inspected his torn leg. "Someone who knows our paths gave them this." Sani hurried toward them, speaking rapidly in Apache, her hands cutting sharply through the air. Rokan shook his head, weakly in reply, exhaustion weighing on every movement. "What is it?" Mae asked. "She says we must leave tonight," Tavo translated. "Cross into Mexico. Only safe place left." "He can't travel like this," Mae protested, motioning toward the wound. "The bullet's still in his leg. He needs rest and medicine." Sani and Tavo exchanged troubled looks torn between danger and necessity. "I can treat him," Mae insisted, her voice steady. "I've helped with bullet wounds before. I just need time and he needs to stay still." After a tense exchange in Apache, Sani nodded. "We stay until morning," Tavo said. "You help him." Mae gathered the supplies she needed with Tavo's help: watercloth, herbs, and a knife she could heat in the flames. Working in the flickering firelight, she cleaned his wounds and prepared to remove the bullet. "This is going to hurt," she warned. Rokan held her gaze, his eyes clear despite the pain. "I trust you." The simplicity of those words struck her harder than any confession of love could have. After everything, captor and captive enemies, forced together, two worlds colliding, his trust felt like something sacred. With Tavo bracing Rokan's shoulders, Mae worked the bullet free. Sweat beaded across his forehead, his jaw clenched so tight she feared his teeth would crack, yet he uttered no sound. When she was done, she cleaned and wrapped the wound, then moved on to the gash across his head, stitching the torn skin with slow, careful precision. "You have skilled hands," Rokan murmured. "I had a good teacher," Mae replied, forcing herself to focus so she wouldn't be rattled by how close he was. "The doctor at my father's post. He taught you well," Rokan said. His gaze softened. "You mend more than wounds, Mae Arden." Her fingers paused. "What do you mean?" "You crossed a line most never dare," he answered. "You see with different eyes now." Mae swallowed, unable to deny it. In just 4 days, everything she had believed had been shattered. She had seen kindness where she'd been taught to expect savagery, cruelty where she'd been taught to see honor. And somewhere along that path she had fallen for a man she once feared. The truth didn't surprise her. Maybe she'd known it ever since the cave when he'd brushed away her tears with such unexpected gentleness. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Rokan's face grew solemn. "Now I take my people south, across the border. It is the only way they survive." "And me," Mae whispered. "You return to your father," he said, though the words carried an ache. "Your place is with your people. Mine is with mine." Mae shook her head. "No, my place is wherever I choose to stand." Rokan stared at her, disbelief battling hope. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I won't go back," Mae said, feeling certainty settle deep in her bones. "Not to that life. Not to pretending I don't know the truth now. Your father will never stop searching." Rokan warned. "Let him search." Mae replied, strength rising in her voice. "I'm not something he gets to reclaim." Rokan reached up, cupping her cheek just as he had in the cave. "The path you choose is hard, Mae. Harder than you understand. All worth fighting for is hard," she said, leaning slightly into his hand. "But no one walks it alone." For the first time since she'd met him, Rokan smiled, a real, soft smile that made her heart stutter. "No," he said softly, "not alone." 3 months later, Mae stood on a ridge overlooking a quiet valley in the Sierra Madre of Mexico. Below her stretched the Apache camp, her home now settled along a clear running stream framed by pine forests that sheltered and fed them. Getting here had been brutal, especially with Rokan still recovering from his wounds. They had made it slipping across the border, just minutes ahead of a pursuing cavalry unit, led as always by her father Flint Arden, whose iron-willed determination to reclaim his daughter had only sharpened with time. Mae Arden brushed her thumb over the simple silver band on her finger, the one Rokan had given her the night they pledged themselves beneath the open sky with Sani's blessing and the entire camp standing witness. Their joining hadn't been purely Apache or purely Christian. It had become something new, something that honored both worlds while carving out its own quiet truth. Footsteps softened the dust behind her. When Mae turned, she saw Rokan walking toward her, the limp nearly gone now. The wound had closed well, leaving only a scar, one small reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Thinking of home, he asked as he stepped beside her. Mae shook her head calm and steady. "I am home." Rokan slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her gently against him. "Your father's men were spotted near Fronteras yesterday," he said. "Still searching. He'll never understand." Mae murmured with a tired breath. "He'll always believe I dragged you away. Maybe someday he'll read your letters," Rokan offered. Mae had written several since their escape, sending them across the border, through traders she trusted with her life. Whether Flint Arden had ever received them, or if he had, and simply refused to believe they were truly hers, she had no way of knowing. "Maybe," she said quietly, though hope felt distant. "But the choice was mine, and I wouldn't undo it." Rokan gently turned her toward him, his dark eyes carrying the same steady devotion that had grown between them since that strange, dangerous meeting in the desert. "No regrets?" he asked. "Not even for what you left behind?" For a flicker of a moment, Mae thought of the life she abandoned, the safety of the fort, the comfortable routines, the expectation she'd someday marry an officer like Jace Haller. Society's easy approval. None of it compared to what she'd found: purpose, truth, and a love forged in fire and impossible odds. "No regrets," she said, rising onto her toes and pressing her lips to his. Rokan's arms tightened around her, his kiss deepening with a passion that still stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead on hers. "The elders say winter will be harsh," he murmured. "We should prepare." Mae nodded, mind already sorting through tasks, checking food stores, preparing remedies, reinforcing shelters. She had earned her place here, helping Sani as an apprentice healer, learning Rokan's people's ways while sharing what she knew of her own. It had not always been simple. Some still watched her with caution, believing her presence invited danger. But day by day she proved herself, through work, through commitment, through quiet endurance. Some might never love her, but they respected her, and respect was enough. "Come," Rokan said, gently threading his fingers through hers. "Sani needs your help preparing the birthing herbs." As they walked toward the camp, Mae glanced back at the distant mountains that marked the Texas line. Somewhere beyond those ridges, Flint Arden continued his relentless search, unable to accept a truth far larger than geography. His daughter had crossed a deeper boundary, one drawn not on maps, but in the heart. She had chosen a new life built by her own hand, rather than the expectations of others. And no matter how treacherous the road ahead might be, she would walk it with pride, with purpose, and with the man whose love had revealed a truth she might never have found alone. In the harshest desert, beneath the most unforgiving sky, the heart still knows the way home. And for Mae Arden, that path ended here with Rokan. With this tribe, with this life she had claimed as her own. Thank you for staying until the final breath of this story. If this tale stirred something deep within you, if it reminded you of love's grit, redemption's power, or the courage it takes to choose your own path, then carry it with you. Let it echo in your heart, inspire your spirit, and guide you towards stories that move the soul. Another journey awaits you, just beyond this one. Turn the page and let yourself be captured again. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover, visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work